There is a car heading to Canada right now that has no rear window. Not a small one, not a tinted one. The entire rear glass has been deleted from the design, replaced by a camera system so sophisticated that what appears on the screen inside gives you more information about what is behind you than any mirror ever could. That is just the first detail. The dashboard stretches wider than most living room televisions. Every seat in the car has heating, ventilation, and massage functions built in as standard. It launches from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3.9 seconds. It carries 4 separate laser mapping units that build a real-time, three-dimensional picture of everything within 600 meters in any direction, in complete darkness, at highway speed. And it was not built in Germany, not in Japan, not in America. It was built in China. It is called the Avatr 12. And by the time this video is done, you are going to understand not just what this car is, but what it represents, why the established premium automotive brands are taking it more seriously than their public statements suggest, and why the fact that it is arriving in Canada rather than the United States tells you something important about where the global EV race actually stands right now. If videos like this are what you are here for, hit like and subscribe before we go any further. Let us get into it. The story nobody wanted to tell. For most of the last 2 decades, the story around Chinese automobiles followed a script that almost wrote itself: affordable, functional, acceptable for markets where price sensitivity mattered more than prestige. The kind of vehicles that served a purpose without attracting much attention from anyone shopping in the premium segment. If you wanted engineering ambition, design sophistication, or brand credibility in a car, you looked to Germany, you looked to Japan. You looked increasingly to America's emerging EV manufacturers. China was not part of that conversation, and most people in the industry assumed it would stay that way for a long time. Industries do not stay frozen. They shift, sometimes gradually and sometimes all at once. What has been happening in China's electric vehicle space over the last several years is not a gradual shift. It is a pressure cooker that spent years building heat in relative silence and is now releasing everything simultaneously. New manufacturers operating with no legacy assumptions. New battery chemistry developed by companies that supply most of the world's electric vehicle cells. New approaches to software, connectivity, and autonomous assistance built by technology companies that have no historical stake in preserving what cars used to be. And new design languages developed by studios that were not handed a brief that said, "Make it look like our existing models." The Avatr 12 sits at the front edge of all of that. It is the product of a 3-way partnership between Changan Automobile, one of China's most established vehicle manufacturers with decades of production experience, CATL, the company whose battery technology powers a significant share of the world's electric vehicles across virtually every major brand, and Huawei, whose name you know from smartphones and whose software ambitions extend considerably further than anyone in the traditional automotive world initially anticipated. It is worth pausing on that combination for a moment, because these are not 3 companies that happen to find themselves working together. Each one brings something the other 2 cannot replicate. Changan brings the manufacturing infrastructure, the supply chain relationships, and the engineering capability to turn a design into a vehicle that can be built consistently at scale. CATL brings the battery technology that defines what is possible in terms of range, charging speed, and energy density. And Huawei brings a software and connectivity platform developed by a company that has spent 2 decades competing at the highest level of consumer technology globally. When those 3 organizations align their capabilities around a single product brief, and that brief says we are not building something for the middle of the market, we are building something that competes at the top. The result is not a compromise between 3 different corporate priorities. It is a vehicle where the powertrain, the energy storage, and the intelligence layer were all designed with full knowledge of each other from day one. That is a structural advantage that most traditional automotive partnerships simply do not have. And the Avatr 12 is what it produces. When those three companies decided to build a luxury electric sedan together, they were not aiming at the middle of the market. They were aiming at the top. At BMW, at Mercedes, at Tesla's premium tier. And what they built is something that, when you go through it carefully and honestly, earns that ambition in ways that are difficult to dismiss. A shape that refuses to compromise. Design is the part of any car conversation that is hardest to translate into words. You either feel a car's visual presence immediately or you do not. No amount of description fully substitutes for the first moment you see it in person. But the Avatr 12 gives us enough to work with. The car stretches 5,020 millimeters in length with a wheelbase of 3,020 millimeters. For context, that puts it longer than a BMW 5 Series and directly in the territory of the Mercedes-Benz EQE full-size luxury sedan proportions, with nothing apologetic about the dimensions. But the Avatr 12 does not carry its size the way those cars carry theirs. A traditional luxury sedan sits relatively upright. The body lines communicate solidity, formality, a certain deliberate gravitas. The Avatr 12 sits low and wide, with a fastback roofline that flows in one uninterrupted curve from the highest point of the roof all the way down to the tail. It looks like something that is moving even when it is standing still. The kind of shape that makes you look again as it passes, not because it is trying to be noticed, but because it genuinely does not look like anything else in the segment. The front of the car dispenses with the traditional grille entirely. There is no large chrome opening referencing 100 years of internal combustion heritage. In its place is a clean, sculpted face dominated by razor-thin LED headlights that cut horizontally across the nose like two glowing blades. In daylight, they look sharp and aggressive. At night, following this car in traffic, you do a genuine double take. It does not look like a car you recognize. It looks like something that came from about a decade ahead of where we currently are. Then there is the rear, and this is where the design makes its most unexpected move. The Avatr 12 has no rear window. Where glass would normally be, there is an unbroken continuation of the bodywork. The rear profile is smooth, architectural, and completely unlike anything currently in production from a European or American luxury manufacturer. When you first hear this described, it sounds like a gimmick. Something a design team included to generate attention rather than because it made any real sense. A feature that exists to be talked about rather than to solve a problem. But when you understand the engineering behind it and see the result in person, the reaction most people have is the opposite. Think about what a rear window actually provides. A limited, fixed field of view through a pane of glass that accumulates dirt, creates glare at night, and still leaves significant blind spots at the corners that mirrors cannot fully resolve. The entire system, window plus mirror plus defogging elements plus the structural complexity of the surround, exists to give the driver an imperfect version of what cameras can now provide far more effectively. The camera system in the Avatr 12 feeds a wide-angle live image to a display positioned exactly where a rear-view mirror would normally sit. The field of view is wider than any mirror. The image is consistent across all lighting conditions, including darkness and direct sun. There is no distortion, no glare, no blind spot that the geometry of a fixed window cannot resolve. Remove the glass, and you also remove the weight, the aerodynamic drag created by the rear screen recess in the body, and the structural complexity of the frame around it. It looks inevitable. Like, this was obviously always the better approach, and the only reason nobody did it sooner was that the industry was too attached to what cars had always looked like to question whether glass at the rear was actually necessary. Add in the frameless doors, the muscular rear wheel arches, and the large wheel diameters, and what you have is a car that does not look like it is trying to compete with the established European luxury sedans. It looks like it has already moved past that competition and is waiting patiently for everyone else to arrive. Inside something designed around the person, there is a specific feeling you get stepping into a car that was designed by people who were genuinely excited about what they were building. It is hard to articulate precisely, but you feel it in the first few seconds. Everything has a reason for being there. Nothing exists simply because it existed in the previous model. The Avatr 12 has that feeling from the moment the door closes behind you. Stretching across the full width of the dashboard is a single continuous digital display, running close to 35 inches from one side to the other. Navigation, speed, driving data, media, climate information, all of it presented in one seamless interface with none of the visual fragmentation that comes from placing separate screens next to each other and calling it a unified system. Most premium German dashboards, which are genuinely well executed, feel busy when you compare them to this. Compartmentalized, designed around the instrument cluster that came before it, rather than around how a driver actually processes information while operating a vehicle. The Avatr 12 dashboard feels like someone started with a blank surface and asked what actually needs to be visible, and where, before anything was placed. The central touchscreen runs Huawei's Harmony OS. If you have used a flagship Huawei device and noticed how responsive and cohesive the operating experience feels compared to more fragmented alternatives, this is that experience built into the center of a car. Every function, climate, navigation, driving mode selection, media, seat adjustment, is handled through an interface that responds without delay and organizes itself in ways that reduce the cognitive load of finding what you need while driving. Voice commands work the way you actually hope voice commands will work, rather than the way they typically do in cars that added voice recognition as a feature rather than building a system around it. And because the car receives over-the-air software updates, it does not stay frozen at the specification it shipped with. It improves. New capabilities get added. Existing systems get refined. The car you drive in year 3 is genuinely more capable than the car you took delivery of on day 1. This is how consumer technology has worked for over a decade. The automotive industry is only now beginning to understand what it means to apply that model to a vehicle. The seats across all positions are wrapped in premium leather with heating, ventilation, and massage as standard. The 3,020mm wheelbase delivers the rear legroom that genuinely changes what a long journey feels like for the people sitting in the back. Not adequate rear space that marketing describes as generous. Actual room. Room that makes you stop thinking about when you are going to arrive and start using the journey for something else. The panoramic glass roof brings in natural light across the entire cabin. It makes an interior that is already spacious feel considerably larger than its dimensions suggest. Sitting in the rear of the Avatr 12, you find yourself genuinely uncertain whether this car is positioned against the Mercedes E-Class or whether its sights are set on the S-Class. The answer, if you are being honest about what you are sitting in, is probably the latter. Numbers that stop the conversation. Performance figures in a luxury sedan only mean something when you have the context to understand what they represent. So here are the numbers first, and then the context. The dual-motor all-wheel drive Avatr 12 produces approximately 578 horsepower, with torque output of around 650 Newton-meters. 0 to 60 miles per hour takes 3.9 seconds. Now the context: 3.9 seconds in a vehicle this size and this specification is not luxury sedan performance. It is not even fast luxury sedan performance. It is sports car performance, delivered inside a full-size four-door with massage seats, a 35-inch dashboard, and enough rear legroom to work comfortably during the journey. The BMW M5, one of the most celebrated performance sedans in the history of the segment, achieves similar acceleration figures. The Avatr 12 does it while being quieter, smoother, and considerably more technologically sophisticated in its day-to-day operation. The battery pack is 94.5 kilowatt-hours. The electrical architecture runs at 800 volts, which is the high tier of current EV technology and the threshold at which charging speed stops being a discussion point and becomes a non-issue. Total range under standard testing conditions reaches approximately 700 kilometers on a full charge. In practical terms, for a Canadian buyer, that is the distance from Toronto to Montreal, with meaningful range remaining when you arrive. No route planning, no charging anxiety, no mental arithmetic about whether a detour is affordable in range terms. The charging speed on an 800-volt architecture means adding several hundred kilometers of range takes roughly the same time as stopping for a coffee. Not a quick coffee, an actual coffee. But the performance and the range are not the most technically interesting part of what this car does. That distinction belongs to the driver assistance system. The Avatr 12 uses 4 separate LiDAR units working in coordination with multiple cameras and radar sensors through Huawei's ADS platform. LiDAR fires pulses of laser light in every direction, thousands of times per second, and uses the returning signals to build a precise three-dimensional map of everything around the vehicle. 4 units means the coverage is essentially complete. No meaningful blind spots at any angle. Not in front, not at the sides, not in the space behind where the rear window used to be. The system detects and classifies objects up to 600 meters ahead in complete darkness, at highway speed, before those objects are anywhere near the vehicle. A pedestrian stepping into the road. A vehicle stopped partially in a lane. Debris on a motorway at 3 in the morning with no ambient lighting. The system sees it, classifies it, and begins responding before most human drivers would have registered that anything was there. It manages lane changes, highway merging, and urban traffic navigation with a smoothness and consistency that makes the experience feel less like a driving aid being supervised and more like a co-pilot that has been doing this for years. Here is the detail that puts this in perspective. Many current European luxury vehicles offer driver assistance systems that require constant oversight, produce occasional unexpected interventions, and need to be disengaged in situations that the system cannot handle reliably. The Avatr 12 system, running Huawei's ADS platform with 4 LiDAR units feeding it, operates at a level of competence and consistency that is categorically different from that experience. The difference between these systems is not incremental, it is categorical. The hardware capability, the processing integration, and the real-world behavioral consistency put it in a different tier entirely. And it is available in a car that starts at the equivalent of $37,000 in its home market. The price that changes the frame. This is where the story stops being about one impressive vehicle and becomes about something larger. Take everything described so far and think about what it would cost to build it elsewhere. A design studio capable of producing a car with this level of visual coherence. A software platform at the level of Harmony OS integrated throughout the cabin. 4 LiDAR units plus the processing architecture to run them. An 800-volt battery system with 94.5 kilowatt-hours of capacity. A premium interior with massage seating across all positions. Sub-4-second acceleration in a full-size sedan body. If a European manufacturer were building this, the price would not start below $100,000. it would likely be considerably more for the full specification. The Avatr 12 starts at the equivalent of $37,000 in China. The fully loaded top trim, with every capability described in this video included, sits at approximately $59,000. Now, bringing this vehicle to Canada involves real additional costs. Import compliance, regulatory certification, distribution infrastructure, after-sales support networks. None of those are trivial. The Canadian price will be higher than the Chinese domestic price. But the underlying point does not change with the currency conversion. The point is about what is achievable when a manufacturer can deliver this level of engineering at this kind of cost base. It resets the benchmark, not for what a Chinese car is, for what any car at any given price point should reasonably be expected to offer. And that is the thing that established luxury brands are genuinely working through right now. Because the question they are asking is not whether the Avatr 12 is good. They can see that it is good. The question they are asking is how it is possible for it to be this good at this price, and what that means for the assumptions their own pricing has always relied on. The honest answer to that question is uncomfortable for them. China's manufacturing cost base, its battery supply chain dominance through CATL, its software development capability through Huawei, and its willingness to invest in new vehicle architectures without the constraint of protecting existing internal combustion model lines. These are structural advantages, not temporary ones. Not advantages that go away when Western manufacturers catch up on a single technology. They are systemic. And the Avatr 12 is what those systemic advantages look like when they are fully expressed in a single product. What the Avatr 12 actually signals. The Avatr 12 is a remarkable car, but the more important thing it represents is a direction. A few years ago, positioning a Chinese luxury electric sedan as a credible rival to BMW, Mercedes, and Tesla in the same sentence would have read as promotional overstatement. It would have invited skepticism from anyone familiar with where Chinese automotive manufacturing had historically operated. Today, walking through the Avatr 12 specification line by line, the car matches or exceeds those competitors in category after category: design coherence, interior technology, driver assistance sophistication, battery capacity, charging speed, performance figures, range. The electric vehicle era was always going to create a reset moment for the automotive industry. When the fundamental architecture of a vehicle changes from internal combustion to electric, the accumulated advantages of decades of refinement in engine and transmission technology do not automatically transfer. Legacy manufacturers start from the same position as new entrants in some of the most critical areas. New players can build without legacy costs, without model lines to protect, without dealer networks whose business models depend on service revenue from combustion engines, without design languages that have to maintain continuity with what came before. The Avatr 12 is what happens when that freedom is applied by people who were given the resources and the mandate to use it fully. And here's the detail that matters most for the direction this is heading. This is not a one-off. It is not a single car that succeeded despite the odds. It is one product in a wave of vehicles coming from Chinese manufacturers operating with the same structural advantages, the same software partnerships, the same battery supply chain access, and the same willingness to challenge assumptions that the industry spent decades treating as permanent. The Avatr 12 is heading to Canada because Canada made a different decision about trade policy than the United States did. American consumers will not be able to walk into a showroom and make this comparison for themselves. The decision has been made for them. Canadian consumers will, and the premium automotive industry everywhere is watching that very carefully, because the market that gets access to real competition tends to move faster. And the market that does not tends to find out what it missed only after the gap has already widened considerably. Here is what that gap currently looks like in practical terms. A Canadian buyer in 2026 can walk into a showroom, sit in the Avatr 12, compare it directly to a BMW i5 or a Mercedes EQE, drive both on the same road, and make their own fully informed decision. They have access to the comparison. An American buyer cannot do that. They can read about it, they can watch videos about it, but the actual experience of sitting in both cars and deciding which one deserves their money is not available to them. Trade policy, not consumer preference, is making that call. And the longer that remains true, the more the gap between what is available to Canadian consumers and what is available to Americans has the potential to widen. The Avatr 12 is not the end of this story. It is an early chapter. The question is how quickly the rest of the chapters arrive and who gets to read them when they do. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss what we cover next. Turn on notifications because the stories we are tracking in the EV space are moving faster than the mainstream conversation is capturing, and you will want to see them as they develop. And here is the question I want to leave you with. If the Avatr 12 became officially available at a competitive price in Canada or the United States tomorrow, would you seriously consider it over a Tesla Model S, a BMW i5, or a Mercedes EQE? Or is there something about the established brands that the specification sheet cannot replace? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one.